Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're talking about Kirby again. This is our fourth Kirby episode. We're talking Kirby Super Star and Kirby and the Crystal Shards, so Kirby 64. But let's just get kicked off here. You're going to talk about Kirby Super Star today.
Yeah, Kirby Super Star. So the lore here on myself and Kirby at this point is I have very little Kirby experience before doing all of these Kirby episodes. So I don't quite have the nostalgia that a lot of people are going to have for games like this. And I think Superstar is one that people have like just a ton of nostalgia for. So if you have good stories about any of these games, like please email them to us because we would love to like read them on the air
for sure
about these games. But Kirby Superstar is a special one. I know it holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. So let's start with the grime facts. The developer of Kirby Superstar is HAL Laboratory. Like all Kirby games are all HAL Laboratory. It was released on March 21st, 1996 in Japan and September 20th, 1996 in North America. So right around the time of the Nintendo 64 launch. It's also on the Wii Virtual Console, the Wii U Virtual Console. It's kind of anywhere Nintendo has sort of re-released games, it's showing up. They also remade it as Kirby Superstar Ultra on the Nintendo DS in 2008. So there are lots of different ways to play it. That's maybe the best way to play it if you have a DS handy. If you're looking for like a sort of updated version of this group of games. But also the Super Nintendo version is great. So yeah. It sold around 1.44 million copies worldwide with the original release, and then Superstar Ultra pushed those sales over 2 million. So the Ultra version didn't sell as well as the original, but it helped a lot. Sold pretty good. The genre here is action platformer. This one's sort of it's got some mini games included too. Like this is sort of a thing that a lot of Kirby games have going for them. There are a few like packs of Kirby games that are like have a few different adventures in them with mini games, and that was kind of kicked off with this, I think, of having like discrete experiences with mini games. But Kirby's Adventure on the NES had a bunch of those mini games as well. So it takes about 5 to 8 hours to complete to finish all the main games. If you're going for everything, it's like 10 to 12 hours. So not a ton of time, even though it says 8 games in one on the box. It's probably got about the gameplay of like one full game, like one decently sized, good full Super Nintendo game.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because the first Kirby game, we talked about it in our first episode. It's very short. Like you beat it in like an hour. You beat it.
Yeah, and I think it's even quicker in Superstar because it's kind of an abridged sort of remake, just kind of for the story. But on Metacritic, Superstar Ultra, the DS version, has an 81 out of 100. The Super Nintendo version obviously doesn't really have a score, but it reviewed pretty well. People generally like it a lot. It's kind of a good like ending game for the Super Nintendo because it came out right around the time of the Nintendo 64. I know Kirby's Dream Land would take like another year and come out like a full year later, Dream Land 3. But it's Superstar was like, that was the one for the Super Nintendo, I think, that everybody loved. So we sort of skipped over it last time in favor of just talking about Dreamland 3. And because what I learned is that people didn't really love Kirby's Dreamland 3, but they did love Kirby Superstar on the Super Nintendo. So that was like a sort of an oversight on my end, because I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's like a collection of games. And I saw that the first one was a remake. I was like, oh, it's just it's kind of a collection of old Kirby games that were remade, like a Super Mario All-Stars kind of thing. And it's like, oh, okay, great. Maybe we don't need to talk about that. Let's move on to the real game, Dreamland 3. And then I was wrong. Superstar is the one.
Sometimes it happens. We get things wrong and then we correct it. So
yep, that's right. And I mean, and while Mario All-Stars is awesome and maybe worth talking about at some point, it is just a collection of old Mario games, and that's kind of what I thought this one was. It doesn't help that the game is called Superstar, which sort of All-Star, Superstar.
Kind of close. A lot of star talk.
Yeah. A lot of star talk sort of led me down that path. So I apologize. Superstar is a great game. Dreamland 3 is also fine. On the box, it says there are 8 games in one. There are 8 games in this game. And that's true. There are a few different games. So I'm going to break them down right here, list them all out, and then we'll kind of go into each one a little bit. So Spring Breeze is kind of a remake of Kirby's Dreamland, where Kirby battles King Dedede, and he wants to recover Dreamland's stolen food. Solid story. Very no frills here.
Classic game Kirby.
That's right. It is the most classic Kirby, the classicest Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
Dynablade introduces this giant bird that's like just like wreaking havoc on Dreamland's crops. And so Kirby has to go defeat Dynablade, but then ends up like sort of helping raise the chicks of Dynablade, which is fun. So
Aw,
yeah, it's a nice ending.
the game.
There's a different type of game called Gourmet Race, which has Kirby racing against King DDD to like collect food. It's like just super fast. It's meant to be kind of a break from the platforming of the first two games. It's a very different kind of game, and that's one of the things that you will notice about all of these games. Is like they're all a little different. They kind of play on the same sort of gameplay loop, but they feel like separate games, and I think that's part of the reason that people love this so much, because it really does feel like 8 games in one. And if you were a kid trying to get the most bang for your buck here, 8 games in one sounds pretty good.
Oh yeah,
Which is
that's
awesome.
that's kind of one of those things where you're just like really excited. Remember those things that you'd be at the grocery store? My grandparents got me one. It was like 100 games in one, but it's
Yeah.
just like 18 different variations of Brick Breaker and like
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
different variations of Tetris. This feels better than that.
Yeah. This is definitely better than that. So the next game is then the Great Cave Offensive, which is like actually pretty big, pretty expansive game. It plays like a mix between a platformer and kind of a treasure hunting thing. So what you're trying to do is Kirby falls into like this massive underground cave, and he's got to kind of navigate through these different areas: the Subtree, the Crystal, the Old Tower, the Garden. And the main objective is to collect. There's like 60 hidden treasures in here, which are like kind of gold coins. Some of them are fun references to other Nintendo games, like Captain Falcon's helmet from F-Zero is in there.
Oh, that's
The
cool.
Screwball from Metroid is in there. It's called Screwball in this, but it's a screw attack from Metroid. So the Great Cave Offensive is more of an exploration and like puzzle solving thing over combat focused. It's less focused on that. Some of the treasures are harder to get to than others. There are some fun like RPG style battles in there. Like there's one against what called the Computer Virus boss, which like sort of parodies these like turn-based RPG mechanics. It's pretty funny. You just have to like look at it or play it to like really get what it's doing there. And they do that a couple of times in some of the other games too, in this too. After the Great Cave Offensive is a game called The Revenge of Meta Knight, which I'm not really sure what he's getting revenge for, because as far as I know, this is the first time we've seen it. Well, no, maybe not. I guess in Dreamland 2 and stuff like that, we've seen it.
Yeah, that's one of those characters. Like Meta Knight's not really. It's forgetting it because he's got a Smash character, Meta Knight, right?
Yeah.
Not really as like big to me as King DDD is.
Yeah.
In the games we've talked about so far. I should preference, but like
I can't remember off the top of my head. I think he is in some of the earlier ones. I guess that's what he's getting revenge for. But Kirby there's kind of like a time limit. He has to stop Meta Knight from conquering Dreamland by destroying his airship, the Halberd, which is something that we will see show up in a lot of different HAL Laboratory games.
That's a really cool name for an airship, though. The Halberd.
Yeah, the Halberd. Had the HAL Laboratory bird. I'm making this connection now as I'm saying it out loud.
I feel like it's like a reference to like it's a double. It's play on words because you got Halberd the weapon, and then he's a knight, and then you got HAL Laboratory, the developers. It's good.
And Halberd, it's flying fortress, so birds fly. Whoa.
That's a 3 times wordplay for HAL Laboratory. Give it up for him, folks. You should start clapping. That is pretty good. Listening to this, you should start clapping.
It's pretty good. And then the last one is Milky Way Wishes, which is kind of like a finale game. Kirby travels between planets to restore peace, but he can't like copy anybody's abilities directly. He sort of unlocks powers by finding them in this mode. So they're all kind of variations of the same sort of gameplay where you're getting new power-ups and getting new moves, and a lot of the same moves persist between games. But they do feel like separate experiences. They don't feel like sort of mods on to like a standard Kirby. Like they do feel like separate games. Like the HUD is different, and a lot of the controls are a little bit different. Like they feel different. Especially Great Cave Offensive is just like a much slower thing. So I'm kind of surprised that there's really only 7 or 8 hours of gameplay between all of these, because it looks like several full games in there. And I watched some a playthrough that plays through all of them. Maybe it's a speed run, so it's like 2.5 hours. But they do play. You can get through all of them if you're really good at it. So
I bet you it's longer if you're a kid and you're just figuring it out on your own.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure. It's probably like 10 to 20 hours if you're a little kid.
Yeah, and when I played games as a little kid, like my goal was like not necessarily to finish the game. My goal was just to play it and to explore and to find all the little doors and all the little secrets. Like I just had infinity time and infinity energy and no money So I play the same games over and over again. So I think if your goal is to like, I want to play through and get through the experience, 7-8 hours. If you're a kid who is just exploring and doing stuff, infinity, you just play this forever,
Yeah.
Which is really cool. So we move on to talk about the development here. Kirby Super Star, as we said before, was developed by HAL Laboratory. Masahiro Sakurai directed this one. He is the creator of Kirby. So development began a few years earlier in the early 1990s after Dreamland and Kirby's Adventure were successful. Sakurai had a vision to create something bigger. He wanted to make a multi-game experience that would appeal to both beginners and experienced players. So I think that's also part of why this has such good memories for people, because they could kind of grow with this game. It was like cute and fun for little kids, and then as they got a little better at games, they could start to make progress in this and learn like
I love
playing
that.
games.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, one of the biggest innovations they did in this one was the multi-move copy ability system. In earlier Kirby games, each ability just had one move, but in Superstar, each power came with a few different moves. So think about like in Smash Brothers, how everybody has like their up B, their side B, down B, like just B. Everything has like, especially Kirby, because as he inhales different enemies, he gets like a whole new set of moves in Smash Bros. And that comes from Superstar. It's like every enemy that you take the abilities from, you get a few different moves from them, all built around whatever the gimmick of that enemy is.
Silly question. Have we done Super Smash Brothers yet?
I don't think we have.
Okay, well, just keep that in mind.
Add it to the list.
I mean, yeah, that's a long list now, but yeah.
Yeah.
I still want to do Minecraft too, because I've been playing that. Okay, keep going.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't want to...
So yeah, that was like one of Sakurai's like really big goals here, was to add depth to the gameplay without losing that simplicity and the fun that Kirby was kind of known for. And then the other innovation is the helper system, which allowed a second player to control an enemy that like sort of turned into your ally, almost like the animal companions from earlier games, except for this was like a person or a character that was independently controllable. And I want to say they did that in Dreamland 3, but I can't remember now.
We got to do a big shout out to Rick the hamster. Where my Rick fans at?
My man. Yeah. So it's like kind of cool to have this little co-op feature in there, sort of like a little brother mode that you can hand your controller and they can like do stuff, but they can't really mess you up. So yeah, game took about 3 years to develop and really, really pushed the hardware of the Super Nintendo to its limits. There's like a ton of sprites everywhere. They're like rotating and scaling. There's probably Mode 7 stuff going on in there that we don't even know about. And then it has that weird like semi-CG look in some of the backgrounds that like cutscenes from like these later like mid-90s 16-bit games would have. Like sort of by the end of that generation, you started seeing these things like sort of like Donkey Kong Country, where it's like it was made in a 3D program but then like converted into sprites. So you see some of the backgrounds have these like weird sort of like simple polygon things. It kind of reminds me of Sonic 3D Blast on the Genesis or the Saturn. So it like that's sort of the aesthetic going on there, and I think that's an artistic choice. That's not like necessarily pushing the hardware to its limits, but it is utilizing different techniques to make those sprites, and I thought that was kind of cool, and also like makes it sort of look like it's from that time, But they did consider a direct sequel to Superstar on the Nintendo 64, but eventually they kind of scrapped it. But they did take a lot of ideas from Superstar, and they would use them in further things in the series. So you're going to talk about Kirby 64 in a minute, but I want to like talk about what Superstar did for the Kirby franchise and kind of its legacy here. So despite feeling a bit more like a compilation or like just a collection, Superstar really added like a lot to the franchise. Features that would become standard not just in Kirby games, but then in other games like Smash Bros, like we talked about. The multi-move copy ability system was like a huge thing. You weren't limited to one action anymore. Like you got the sword and you could just swing a sword. Now you can kind of do a few different moves with the sword, that kind of stuff. You can like slash, you can spin, stab upward. It makes all the powers feel like a little bit more robust, right? And then the helper system, which allowed someone else to control, a CPU enemy on your team. That was kind of cool. That was something that was added into the series here. Like I said, it's like a little brother mode or little sibling mode. I think a lot of games benefited from having that kind of thing. Like Super Mario Galaxy, remember, had like the little pointer thing where you could like collect stars with a second Wii remote.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, so you could like hand the Wii remote to like a little kid and be like, yeah, point at the screen and get all the stars, and like they can feel like they're doing something without messing you up, And that gets them into games, and then pretty soon they're better than you at those games, and then
they're buying their own games, and the capitalism wheel keeps turning.
That's right. That's right. The multi-game structure of this was really cool too. Rather than just like one big long adventure, there was like a bunch of little games, which I think caters well to the shorter attention spans of kids too. And so you could finish a game and then you move on to something that feels very, very different and makes it feel like it's a whole new game. So you really got this like, oh yeah, definitely 8 games in one on this cartridge, which is like just bang for your buck, really, really good. Even if the total content is about as much as a normal game, it just feels like there was a lot more going on here. So I think that kind of adds to the game's replayability too, especially because you could replay specific games, right? That was really neat. And then there's a lot of like fun Easter eggs in this game. A lot of them are in the Great Cave Offensive, where that mode where you're going around treasure hunting. So there's stuff like Lololo and La La La, which are bosses in the Great Cave Offensive. They're from an earlier HAL Laboratories game called The Adventures of Lolo. I already talked about the computer boss virus, or the computer virus boss. That's like kind of a turn-based RPG with like stats and stuff, and you fight enemies like slime and dragon. And then the halberd isn't really an Easter egg in and of itself, but it does come back a lot in especially in Smash Bros. Games. It's a stage in Smash Bros. And I want to say the Subspace Emissary game mode from Smash Bros. Brawl. I want to say a lot of it took place on the halberd, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe it was just a different airship.
Brawl is the Super Smash Brothers I have the least amount of experience with.
Yeah, that's the Wii one that has. I really love the Subspace Emissary mode in that. I thought like that mode alone made Brawl worth it to me. I know people didn't really love the PvP. There was like the aspects of it that just didn't really like, but the Subspace Emissary like platforming game thing with Smash Bros mechanics felt so good. It was so fun, and it was like really long. I want to say it took me like 15 or 20 hours to beat back in the day.
Oh, wow. I was playing that mode in Smash Brothers Ultimate where it's like you start as Kirby and you're like fighting to unlock other characters that are like trapped and imprisoned. I don't really know like how long the mode. It just seems like it keeps going, like it never ends. And I'm like, am I just in this now? Is this my life now? So I stopped playing it. But
yeah, is it a new? Is it also Subspace Emissary?
it might be. I don't know what the name of it's called. I mean, and someone's like yelling it at me in the in the in their phone right now or whatever, their car, but I can't remember what it's called. And now we'll talk about what I've been playing this week because I'm so excited to talk about it. So
oh yeah, I'm stoked on that. There's a few more Easter eggs here. Sword Kirby has like a green cap. It looks like he looks like Link from Zelda. And then of course we already talked about the Metroid, the screw attack is in there with Captain Falcon's helmet. So yeah, it's pretty cool. One of the things that keeps sticking out for me about these Kirby games is how much ended up influencing Super Smash Bros. Like all the powers that Kirby can get, all of the different up B or the different B moves in Smash Bros. That Kirby gets from literally every other character that sort of started in Superstar. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I think it's because Sakurai directed both of these series, so there's just a ton of crossover here. But it almost feels like to me, going back, because I've spent a lot of time with Smash, not like a lot, not as much as some people have, but like I've played Smash Brothers, right? Going back and playing these Kirby games makes me feel like Smash Bros is actually just a Kirby game with a bunch of other characters like thrown into it.
Yeah, I feel like Smash has more Kirby influence than any other Nintendo property.
Yeah,
for sure.
more than I would have thought. And of course it makes sense when it's made by HAL Laboratories, as a director is the same. Like this makes sense to me, but I just wasn't aware of how much Kirby influences in Smash Bros. Like it is a Kirby game, but with a bunch of other characters in it, I think. And then let's touch briefly on the DS remake of Kirby Superstar Ultra. So that came out in 2008. Ultra brought a few upgrades and some new content while kind of staying true to the charm of the original. So all of the visuals are completely redone. They moved from 16-bit Super Nintendo art to like 2D sprites, like cleaner 2D sprites on the DS. There are some CGI cutscenes, so if there's some cinematics between the games, that's pretty cool. So like everything about it just looks better, even though they still keep kind of the same art style. It's just all higher res and looks better. They added 4 new sub games: Revenge of the King, which is kind of a harder version of Spring Breeze, which is that remake of Kirby's Dream Land. There's Meta Nightmare Ultra, where you get to play as Meta Knight, and then like the helper system is still there and the co-op on DS. But you need 2 consoles to do it, and like I think one of the if you do it in like single cartridge mode, you don't even really see anything on the other DS. You just like have to look over the shoulder of of your friend to like play co-op using your DS as a controller, which is like kind of weird. But
That is kind of
cool,
weird.
I guess. They don't use the touchscreen a whole lot, but it does like the screen kind of shows you, health and your abilities and enemy health and that kind of stuff. This is probably the best way to play it these days. If you're looking to get like experience the story of these games, if you want the authentic experience and want to know what people fell in love with back in the day, then of course you got to go back and play the original Super Nintendo game, and you could play it on any of the virtual consoles. I'm sure it's on the Super Nintendo emulator on Nintendo Switch at this point. So, yeah. So that's kind of Superstar. It's like a whole bunch of games in one. It's a classic Kirby adventure, and then there's a bunch of other games in there, and they're all kind of centered around that same Kirby gameplay. So I understand why so many people think this is like their goat for Kirby games, because there's just so much content here, especially for a kid to like explore, because all those levels have so many different doors in them. And of course, if you know the fastest way through, you can speed run it. But if you want to explore and see what all the enemies are and get all the different powers, like there's a lot to do here. So yeah, it's cool.
For sure. Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes me want to try to get the Ultra version, because I do have a 2DS, so I can play old DS games on it. So it's it makes me think I should do that. All right, well, let's get into the next one now. We're going to talk about Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards. So this was once again developed by HAL Laboratory, and it was released on March 24th, 2000 in Japan, June 26th, 2000 in North America, and June 22nd, 2001 in the EU. Re-releases available on the Wii Virtual Console. The things that aren't there anymore. I don't even know. Can you access the Wii Virtual Console?
No, you cannot.
Wii U? Yeah, you can't. So if you're gonna play this, play it on the Switch Online with Expansion Pass. That's how I played it. I recommend that's the best way to go. Or if you have a Nintendo 64, fire that bad boy up.
Or if you own a cartridge, you can play it on any old emulator.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I would say like the Switch Online version for me was really great because it has you do save states, which just makes the pressure of playing these retro games without save states just all gone and makes it a lot easier. Also, going to save you a lot of time, which is if your resource of yours is time, like Tyler and I, you want to have that knowing that you're not going to lose anything. Okay, so approximately 1.79 million copies sold worldwide. It's an action platformer. It's got some puzzle stuff in there too. It's a Kirby game. All right. Around 67 hours for the main story, full completion 10 to 12. And it has a Metacritic score of 77 out of 100. So this is where Kirby 64, I'm just going to call it Kirby 64. I'm not going to say Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards for the rest of the episode. So everyone just be aware.
You're going to call it by its full name every time?
I'm not going to call it by its full name every time. I'm not going to do that. There's no way. I don't
have
that
time. If I get confused,
time.
I'm going to let you know.
Okay, well, let me know if you get confused. So this is what's known in the biz as a 2.5D scroller, since all the models are rendered in 3D, but you are still playing the game across like a 2D plane, like you're going from side to side.
Gotcha.
Right?
So technically speaking, programmatically speaking, it's a 3D game, but gameplay-wise, you don't have to think about anything that's not 2D.
Not left to right, pretty much. Yeah. There are some exceptions to that while you're playing, but it's most of the time it's left right. I personally, the way I would describe the look of Kirby 64 is like a diorama. It's like you're playing in a diorama, and you can even see the background of the paths that you go on, like because a lot of them are in a circle, so you can kind of see behind you, and that's kind of the look of it. But there is your standard Kirby fare, like you're going to be floating, you're going to be eating, you're going to be taking abilities. However, there are some new exceptions that Kirby 64 brings into it. First and foremost, air shot does no damage.
Oh,
yeah. So all you old classic air shot fans, that doesn't really do anything. Like in the old platformers, if you sucked up air and spit it out, you could use it as a weapon. And this doesn't do any damage at all. So don't make the same mistakes I did. The game introduces, though, the big thing in this game is power combos. So power combos let you combine two powers by shooting them with the C buttons. So this makes like a bigger star that you can eat up, and then you get a combo of those two powers. And I'm going to say, like, as a player, this feels really strong. Like, it makes you feel really, really strong. It's one important thing to note, too, is that you can power combo with two of the same power in this to make like a bigger version. So for example, The big boomerang is OP, if you ask me. It's like really strong. Big boomerang is a really, really good power up. Another big change is that instead of fighting King DDD, which don't get me wrong, you still do, but after you fight King DDD, he's your ally. You're on the
He's
same
your
side.
friend.
It's almost as if he knows how much of a threat the Crystal Shards are. Ooh, right? That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So after each level, there are a bunch of power-ups laid out on like a picnic blanket kind of thing, and you can like jump to the right one. I'm gonna be totally honest. I didn't look this up and I didn't figure it out. I kept missing. I kept missing, but I was like,
Is
you
it
know
like
what?
the leaping mini game that's at the end of some of the levels
I think
in?
it's like that, but
Okay.
I don't know the controls of it, and I would always leap and not land on anything, and then I just got real sad. And so I was
Okay.
like, I could look this up, but I want to try to win on my own, and I didn't win on my own. So the non-combat power-ups in the game are food items, and they're really tasty looking. Like it's like a piece of cake. Like, ooh, that's a good looking piece of 3D cake. You know what I mean? So you get into it. They also have the Maxim tomatoes, and that like fully heals you up too. And they also have 1-ups. The boss fights in this game, though, I think are pretty cool because since it's not entirely 2D, you get some interesting interactions with damaging bosses. So, for example, spoilers, the first boss fight is you're going to be fighting the tree. Remember the
You're
tree, the
always
classic.
fighting the tree. You
You
fight the tree
always
like 6 times in
Yeah, you
Superstars.
always fight the tree. It's like kind of a tradition, right? It's like rats in an RPG. You're going to fight the
Mm-hmm.
tree, you're going to fight the rats in the beginning, okay? So this is exciting though because you don't actually spit apples back at him, which is a welcome change. Like there's a different way to damage him. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but there's a different way to damage him, which is pretty exciting. Also, the final boss fight, because you have to collect all of the crystal shards to get the true ending. The final boss fight of this is gosh, my camera keeps going in and out. Sorry, everybody. The final boss fight is actually, and I don't want to excite you, Tyler, it's more like Star Fox 64 than anything. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
I love
like
Star Fox
you're on
64.
the back of like the fair, you're on a ferry that's flying you around, and you're like moving from behind as a third person, like Star Fox, and shooting the crystal
Cool.
shards. It's pretty cool. So let's get into the plot. So when I started playing this game, I had no idea what was going on. And this is one of those old games that does not really tell you exactly what's happening because it has a long story in the instruction manual.
Ah.
Yeah, remember those? Remember those
I
instruction
remember going
manuals?
back and reading the story in the instruction manual and be like, these games have stories.
Yeah, these games have stories. In a distant corner of the galaxy, fairies lived peacefully on the planet called Ripple Star. But then one day, a mysterious black cloud appeared and surrounded the peaceful planet. The cloud, a sinister force known as dark matter, had come in search of the fairies' secret treasure, their shining crystal. Are you in right now?
I'm in.
Okay.
Crystals, you got me.
This is me trying to audition to read audiobooks. Here we go. A fairy named Ribbon knew that dreadful things would come to pass if dark matter gained control of the powerful crystal. She grabbed the shining stone and escaped from Ripple Star just before the planet was completely engulfed. But as Ribbon fled, 3 dark clouds splot from the mass of dark matter to chase her through the space. And when they caught up with her and attacked, the fairy's crystal shattered into tiny shards, which dropped like falling stars onto the many planets in the solar system. Still holding one of the crystal shards, Ribbon fell onto the planet called Pop Star, where, perhaps by fate, she ran smack into Kirby. After hearing her desperate plight, Kirby resolved to help Ribbon recover all the crystal shards. So that's the story. Was it good?
Kirby's good dude, gonna help him out.
Mm-hmm. Kirby's always good,
Mm-hmm.
wants to help people out. So let's get into development for this. And I found a really cool interview from it's actually like from Nintendo, which is really neat, because I love it because they actually do like interviews, which is nice, and talk about the games. So this is 2 different people. We're going to start with Takashi Saito, who's the one who actually made Kirby 64, like was director on that, and then we'll get talk about Masahiro Sakurai's take on it because Sakurai actually didn't work on the game, so it's kind of interesting to hear him talk about it. So I broken this down into kind of the facts from what I got from the interview. So Saito was primarily in charge of scheduling and managing the teams for production of the game, kind of like overseeing everything. Production of Kirby 64 began in September of 1997, and the game was actually done by 1999, but they held and decided to make some big changes, which kind of delayed it, right? So, because I even mentioned in here, it didn't come out until 2000, so they kind of delayed it for a year to
Wow.
make, yeah, to kind of polish and finish things up. The biggest change they made during this time was abandoning the control stick for the D-pad. That is a big thing. I didn't really mention this in the gameplay part because we're going to get into here. It's weird. You don't use the control stick at all on the Nintendo 64. So you're going to be holding the controller not in the middle, but like on the
Yeah, that's
outside
one of
instead
the
of the.
only games that's how you hold it primarily. It's like this in Pokemon Stadium, I think, is like
Yep.
that's it.
The only ones that you hold it like that. So it's the reason they did it is because they noticed that small children tended to not actually hold the controller and they would get lost with like the Z button, thinking the Z
Mm,
button did stuff. So they moved it to the Z pad to just simplify everything because there's no Z button for you to access there. So it's not hard or anything.
that makes
So
sense.
for Saito, part of the power combo system was still to make the game appealing to all players. Like they wanted a game that could either be played very simple or more advanced with all these combos. And that's true. I'm going to say, is like my opinion. I didn't finish Kirby 64, but the parts of it I played were pretty simple. And I do feel like you can play this game in one of two ways. You could play it by just like barreling through it, or you could play it by I'm going to build my strongest combo and then just wreck everything really easily. Like that's kind of how you can do this game. And I think there's some strategy to it there. So there is a deeper element to it, but this is still very much a Kirby game. It's very much, I'm not going to say like it's easy, but I'm going to say it's simple to be appealing to all players. And in that case, it's very successful with it. So,
Classic Kirby.
yeah, I didn't really get that far, and I don't know what that final boss fight's like. Like, I ended up watching videos of the things later on, right, just to kind of see what it looks like. And it seems like that final boss fight and collecting all the shards does challenge you. So I'm going to say that. So, but you do get that other ending if you don't get all the shards. So the final fact about development that I thought was interesting is that Kirby's creator, Masahiro Sakurai, actually had very little or nothing to do at all with Kirby 64's development. And you
Wow.
mentioned he was working on Superstar
Hmm.
before this, right? And in the second half of the interview, they asked him if he even played it, and he says no. Quote, I haven't played it yet. Actually, I've been trying to avoid even taking a peek at Kirby 64. I'm afraid I'd start making comments which might conflict with the vision of the development team and create confusion. End quote. So I kind of like this. Like he's kind of like giving it away in a way to like be like
Yeah.
you can all have your take on this. And so the legacy of this game is I think it works pretty well. It's definitely an experiment for Kirby. And I think it works. I don't know what other people think. So if you're a person listening to this and you have strong opinions about Kirby 64 one way or another, I want to hear them because from my take on it, it was fine. It wasn't I do think that you got some better games in Kirby. You know, I think Dreamland 2, I think Superstar, but as far as the experiment of Kirby goes, I think this has got a lot going for it and it's definitely worth trying. Also, a welcome change to see like DDD not someone you fight and also help you. Like DDD at one point uses his hammer to like break rocks and let you through. It's kind of like you see the other characters. Okay, we're gonna go kind of out there. Remember in Destiny 2, where you finally get to see it. Spoilers for people. You get to see the actual characters fight with you in the end, and they like
Hmm.
show up. That's kind of what's going on in Kirby 64 is King DD will just pop into a stage and like clear a path for you and then you can keep going, or like the fairy shows up and does something and like it's really cool. There's also a fairy that like paints and they'll like paint stuff and like fix the world for you. It's got this very artsy vibe to it and I really dig it. And I think it's a really cool like kind of in the way like the Yoshi's Yarn stuff, you know, it
Yeah.
looks like
Yeah.
it's like the woolen world, like that kind of thing. It's got a cool art style to it.
There's
Also,
some
as a
Kirby games like that too, from in that era. Like I think the Wii U
yeah,
Kirby game is like Kirby's Epic Yarn or something.
yeah. So it's got that kind of crafting motif, is how I would describe it with it. The one quick aside I have is if you beat the game where you beat the final boss and you do it all right, there is a scene that's like an end cut scene that I don't want to say parodies exactly the Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope ending, but it's trying. Like, it's like they all have medals around their necks and they're standing in front of like a king fairy or a queen fairy and they're like getting the medals put around their neck. And I'm like, are you guys just ripping off Star Wars right now?
Nintendo was big on that in those days because Star Fox 64 is just a straight ripoff of the end of A New Hope. Like they get the medals and General Pepper tells them they did a great job. It's
Yeah, that's what I feel like is happening at the end of Kirby 64. So maybe it's something about this generation where they're like, we're going to try to add the Star Wars Episode 4 ending in like all our games we can. But I just thought it was really funny. So this experience though made me want to play the new Kirby and the Forgotten Land game on Switch. So we'll see if I'm going to make that happen because we'll talk about it in a bit. But Tyler, what have you been playing?
Well, I have been playing. So I was playing Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, put a few hours into that, and then Astro Bot came out, and I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago. I played the crap out of Astro Bot. I platinum trophied it, loved it, perfect game, no notes. It's one of the greatest of all time, in my opinion.
Platinum
and then
trophied it.
I did, I did everything in that game, yeah. And then I went back to playing a little bit of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. Did not get much further because Zelda Echoes of Wisdom came out. And so I picked up a copy of that, and then I proceeded to play it in an emulator on my PC. But I do have a copy of it, and if somebody, I could go grab it, but I don't know if anybody cares.
I just want to show my legal copy of.
Yeah, you have a legal copy. For those listening, Mike is holding his copy of Echoes of Wisdom next to
I just happen to have it on my desk because that's what I'm gushing. I mean, I'll just jump in because that's all I've been playing, and I've been gushing over it all week. Like I love the game. I figured you and I can just talk about it, how much we love it, because that's what the Switch I've been playing is going to be. I bought it yesterday, and it was just, oh god, it's so good.
I'm so glad you're playing through it because I blasted through it. Like I finished the whole thing kind of in a little bit over a weekend. It also didn't hurt that I had COVID this last week, and so there were a couple of days of work where I was not really. I was just taking a break from work, and so I was like, well, what am I going to do? I guess I'll play this game, and I sunk a lot of time into Echoes of Wisdom while I was sick. So, yeah, it's great. It's a perfect blend of like classic Zelda dungeon like structure, the same overall structure with a lot of the emergent gameplay stuff. Not a lot of it, with some of the emergent gameplay stuff from Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild in the Echoes system, which I'll let you talk about the Echoes system. But it's like really, really cool way to like give people the tools to solve puzzles in any way that they want.
Oh yeah. I hit a point where I finally looked something up because I was like, how do I do this? It was like a tall pillar. And it turns out because you have choices, right? If you go to the first choice, you get an echo that can help you with that tall pillar. But they gave me an echo that helped me, and I didn't even know it worked. But you can jump on, like in the same way in a Link's Awakening, Link could pick up a chicken and kind of hover in the air a little bit. You can do that in this version as well, where you pick up a crow and it like takes you across chasms and stuff. Yeah, man, the ecosystem is great. Like, I love it. I love how much I just put beds down to make ramps and bridges.
Yeah, beds are like the most used. Beds and crates. And
then I love the flying tile. I just got that. That's really
that
cool
one's really good too.
And I just got the bow. But I mean, it's just, again, the things that I love about Link's Awakening are in this, and it's got that same look. It's like they're like, hey Mike, let's make you a Zelda game. That's what it feels like to me right now.
Yeah, it's got that art style so great, that like plastic toy.
Yeah, I was just gushing about it to my wife. I was telling her like, this is so good. She hasn't seen it yet. I'm like, you need to play this. Like, I don't even care if it deletes my save on my Switch when I'm done. You should play this. Like, it's so good. And I think she'd really like it because it's just also it's so cool. It's like a cool twist on the classic Zelda thing. And it just works, and it works really well. And you still have all the lore of Zelda in there that you love.
And in fact, you play as Zelda.
Yeah, you play as Zelda too. That's what people.
You got to rescue Link.
You got to rescue Link, and you got to rescue everyone. Like, that's the thing. And it's true because I think in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, those games showed us that sure, Link's special, but Zelda's like more special.
Yeah, Zelda's like cooler than Link.
Yeah, because the Triforce is from what I understand, I'm getting this wrong. It's like the three of the Triforce is like Link's courage, Zelda's wisdom, Ganon is power, right? And so that's why this is Echoes of Wisdom, is you're playing as Zelda. I just think I want them to do more. I want more of it. I want different games now in the Zelda universe in the style where you don't play as Link.
Yeah.
Like, how cool would it be if you could play as like Ganon? Give me a Ganon origin story or something. I don't know. I think it'd be really neat to just play as someone else. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's really fun.
Yeah.
And Zelda, I mean, you had Sheik, and I think you could play as Sheik and Zelda in that Dynasty Warriors, Hyrule Warriors game, right?
Yeah. I
But
don't count that as a Zelda
that's not a
game.
Zelda game. Yeah, that's not like a mainline Zelda. This is amazing. I love it so much, and I am a full on fanboy, and I don't even care because
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
Looking forward to sequels, hopefully.
I hope so too. 'Cause I'm ready. I'm ready for them to take a break on the Tears of the Kingdom Breath of the Wild style. I'm ready for them to like a long break on it. Like,
Yeah.
I want that. I
Was it
want.
not a long enough break between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom?
No, it really wasn't. I actually that's why I kind of stopped playing Tears of the Kingdom in the middle of it because I was just kind of like, I just
Sort
wasn't
of more
feeling
of
it
the same.
anymore.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So this is like a little different, a welcome change, and it's also I think you said it's like 20 hours or something like that.
It's probably less than that. It's probably 15.
It's like it's a reasonable game. Like
Yeah, it's a
like
normal game length, and that's good, I think, for games like that because they can drag on. Like they could add 10 more dungeons, and like eventually it kind of drags.
Yeah, for sure. So I love it though. I've been playing that. That's pretty much it. And I played Kirby, obviously, but this is it for us. So that feels good for me for this week.
Yeah,
I
that's
had
good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've really played. Oh, I've been playing Tetris Effect Connected because it went on sale on Steam. So like that's kind of a thing I'll play sort of right before bed.
nice.
Some nights. Yeah.
On your PC handhelds?
Yeah, well, I got bad news about one of my PC handhelds. My
Oh,
ANEO Air 1S has a swollen battery, a spicy pillow. And
Spicy
so
pillow. I love
that's
saying
that's the
spicy
subreddit,
pillow.
spicy pillows.
I love spicy pillow. It's so funny to me.
So yeah, I noticed the screen was like kind of pushing up and out, up but not out of it last weekend. And so I ordered a new battery. I took it apart. I was like, yeah, this battery's swollen. I ordered a new battery because it's out of warranty, which was not too expensive. It was like $50, shipping included, but it still hasn't shipped. And I'm pretty sad about that because I really want to get this thing back together. I have some other handhelds I've been kind of messing with in the meantime. But I did transfer my save from Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga on my handheld to my actual 3DS. I did some hackery and I got my save onto my actual 3DS. So that's probably where I'll play that game for now.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're gonna play it on red. I mean, you always own the legal copy, obviously.
Of course, yeah,
obviously, but you always do. So I have one email I want to read because I missed it during our mailbag. We have some other emails too, but I'm just gonna read this one, and this is actually from Brad, and Brad wanted us to he had a suggestion here. It's Atari 50. Oh my God, why haven't any of you played or said anything about it? No, seriously, it is a game documentary that you basically base your podcast on. And he says, by the way, I'll listen to any podcast of yours. It's very nice to say. But yeah, I looked up Atari 50. That's like a game that goes through the Atari history, and I'm surprised we haven't played it because that's something that you and I feel like both don't really know a lot about is Atari. Like,
yeah, that's pretty before our time.
I played a little bit of Atari in Fairbanks. I have memories as a kid playing in Alaska, but I didn't really play. Like Nintendo kind of took over my whole childhood, Yeah. So I think this is a great suggestion, and I definitely want to check out Atari 50. And I did look, and I put it on my Steam wish list. So Brad, thank you for the suggestion. We will get into it and look it up. But with that, I think that's it for today, right?
I think so. Yeah,
I feel pretty good about it. Do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
I guess goodbye, everybody.